Greetings, Starfighters. Welcome to the final disc of Season 3 of Shameless Cashgrab. Only 5 movies to go. Well, yeah, 5 movies, but only 4 episodes. Because, see, one of these is, it has both an original and a remake, but, okay, that's going to be like for the last regular episode of the season. This episode is for a movie called The Werewolf vs. Vampire Women. Werewolf versus Vampire Women. What a title, huh? Yeah, that makes me think of that, the Rob Zombie fake trailer for Grindhouse. You know, that Werewolf Women of the SS. You know, and Nicolas Cage as Fu Manchu. Kind of a shame that that one never got turned into a full movie. It's kind of sad. Hobo with a Shotgun was turned into a full movie, and Rutger Hauer just died. So now I'm even more sad. Well, shit, that's a horrible way to start an episode, isn't it?
Okay, so now I have watched The Werewolf vs. the Vampire Woman from 1971. Yep, the actual title is singular, unlike what I said in the video. Because accurate DVD packaging is for companies not named Mill Creek Entertainment. Plot summary courtesy of Letterboxd. Elvira, no, not that one, is traveling through the French countryside with her friend Genevieve, searching for the lost tomb of a medieval murderess and possible vampire, Countess Wandessa. They find a likely site in the castle of Waldemar? Voldemar? It's French. I'll go with Waldemar. Waldemar Daninksy, who invites the women to stay as long as they like. As Daninksy shows Elvira the tomb that supposedly houses the Countess, she accidentally causes the vampire to come back to life, hungrier than ever. Daninksy has a hidden secret of his own, but will it be enough to save the 2 girls from becoming Wandessa's next victims? Okay, there are a few ways that plot summary is inaccurate, but we'll get to those. So, how was the movie? Well, it certainly got off to a rough start. The editing was the choppiest I've seen in any of these Mill Creek sets so far, and that's saying something, and the film quality was less than stellar. Not only was it scratchy, at the start at least, it was all kinds of red, like if the color correction on the Matrix had been handed over to Hal Sutherland. That may be the most obscure joke I have ever made on this show. Anyway, with maybe a second worth of establishing shot, we start with some exposition at a graveyard with a coroner and some other guy going to look at a body that locals are saying was killed by a werewolf. There's a conversation about science versus superstition here, but I'll spare you the details as honestly it was better done in The Vampire Bat, a movie which you may remember is about 40 years older than this one. Also, the dialogue is way off. The coroner was supposed to be looking at a victim of a werewolf, and instead he's examining the body of the guy who's supposed to be the werewolf. That's more than a slight error, wouldn't you say? But yeah, they take the silver bullets out of the body, the werewolf wakes up and transforms, and yeah, it's not great, but honestly, I've seen worse werewolf effects in movies made in this century, so I'm not going to harp on it. He escapes, kills a woman in the woods, and we finally get a title sequence. A title sequence that seems to give away part of the end of the movie. When this is done, though, the color saturation isn't quite so red anymore, but it is still up way too high. Of note, some of the screen caps you're going to see in this show are from the Blu-ray transfer of it. Believe me, it did not look that good on my end. At this point, we meet our main fully human character, who has a name, but I have decided to dub her Miss Flashback, since that's what she goes into barely a minute after we meet her. And that has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that using the character's name would make it too easy to make Elvira mistress of the dark jokes. Anyway, it was a flashback about what she'd learned about an alleged witch named Wandessa, this movie's titular vampire woman. I will only regret phrasing it that way if the character gets naked later in the movie, which is probably 50-50 at this point. We also meet Miss Flashback's boyfriend here, but he's only here to establish his presence so that we'll hopefully remember who he is when he comes back in the last act, to save Miss Flashback and either live happily ever after with her or die in the process of saving her. Again, 50-50. I mean, the guy even name drops James Bond, so he has Big Damn Hero scene written all over him. If I'm wrong, I'll admit it when I get to that part of the episode. Anyway, damn it, I'm self-conscious about how often I say anyway again. Genevieve from the plot summary has shown up now, driving a car and making Dracula jokes. Miss Flashback says they aren't funny, but compared to the vampire happening... and of course, Genevieve is wearing a beret, just in case the audience forgets that she's French. Our werewolf, back in human form and acting like quite the charmer, re-enters the picture at this point. I will refer to him as Daninksy, because as you may have picked up from the plot summary, I'm not really all that confident in the pronunciation of his first name, and that's even after seeing the movie. So there's some dialogue here between Miss Flashback and Genevieve, but parts of it are drowned out by the lightning sound effects being turned up to 11, so I'm not really sure what all they were saying. I was able to pick up that Miss Flashback is already suspicious of Daninksy, which happened a bit sooner than I expected. I imagine his staggeringly obvious panic at the mention of the witch Wandessa, whom Miss Flashback is doing her university thesis on, by the way. I forgot to mention that earlier. That was a dead giveaway. Or rather, an undead giveaway. So shortly after this, we learn Daninksy has a sister who likes to talk cryptically and grope women until they pass out. I guess. Okay, movie, I'll be honest, I haven't been enjoying you so far anyway. Been kind of boring, frankly. But if you seriously pull the evil lesbian trope on me here, I'm just going to skip to the end of the episode. Speaking of the groping, Miss Flashback seems to recover from this whole thing unbelievably quickly. Damn near takes it in stride. The sister, Elizabeth, then attacks and nearly kills Genevieve. Rips her shirt too, though nudity is narrowly avoided. And now the two friends have swapped places in mere minutes, with Miss Flashback now trusting Daninksy after Daninksy explains Elizabeth's issues, and Genevieve being the one wanting to get the duck out of Fudge. So, all of them, well, minus the crazy gropey sister, go to find the tomb of the woman we already know is the vampire, and while Daninksy and Genevieve stay behind to open the coffin in the tomb to confirm the body is there, Miss Flashback wanders off, because of the reason, and Genevieve accidentally cuts herself, removing the silver cross that Wandessa had originally been staked with, and some of the blood falls on the skull, and I think you can see where this is going. And you can see where the plot summary from Letterboxd was wrong, because it blamed Miss Flashback for this. You know, I snark, but actually the scene, despite the clumsy setup for it, is not that bad. Honestly, the only really decent scene in the movie at this point, and I'm almost a half hour into it. After this, Miss Flashback is attacked by what I can only describe as a zombie in monk's robes, but Daninksy kills it with the silver cross before it can touch her. And then night falls, and the vampire Wandessa comes out of her grave. By the way, in case you're wondering, the zombie in monk robes never comes up again, and doesn't seem to be related to anything. But this leads to another decent sequence, when Wandessa summons Genevieve to her. It does make sense, it was Genevieve's blood that helped bring her back, but I'm referring to the visuals of the scene specifically. Solid use of fog and slow motion and some editing tricks that I cannot remember the name of for the life of me. Sadly, the moment is ruined when, for no apparent reason, a rubber duck is added to the score. Okay, probably not literally, but that sure is what it sounded like. And, it only lasted for a second, right there in the middle. What the hell? But then we learn what Daninksy is up to. He wanted the silver cross because, apparently, he needs to be stabbed with it by, quote, the woman who loves him, end quote, as it's the only way his soul will be free. Okay, werewolf with a death wish. Not a bad premise, I can work with this. What happens next is going to sound condensed, but honestly it isn't. All of these things happen in the space of a few minutes. First, Miss Flashback comes downstairs and finds Daninksky's sister dead. Then, Genevieve comes down the hallway with fog covering the floor. Then, Genevieve tries to get Miss Flashback to follow her. Then, Daninksy comes in holding up the silver cross. Genevieve screams and runs away, and Miss Flashback hugs Daninksy. Then Daninksy explains how Wandessa came back and expresses regret at having opened the tomb even though he needed the silver cross to end his curse. Again, This all takes about 2 minutes of screen time. It felt about as rushed as I was talking just there. Also, Walpurgisnacht gets name dropped. If only Homura Akemi was around. They could use her help right about now. This will likely be the only time I get to reference Madoka Magica on this show. Let me have this. I should also point out that in the movie they actually call it Walpurgisnight, but... Anyway, Miss Flashback has fallen in love with Daninksy because the plot says so. To the movie's credit, Daninksy does come across as more sympathetic than one would expect given how we were introduced to him before the opening credits, and that's despite the fairly bland line reads from the English dub actor. He's one of those characters where you wish you could see him in a better movie. At this point in this movie, we are met with Pierre, Daninsky's, I actually forgot what he's supposed to be. Groundskeeper? Butler? Whatever, he's annoying and he talks way too much. I am making this episode a few minutes shorter by just not mentioning his dialogue. No need to thank me. A few scenes later, including one where Daninksy becomes a werewolf again and kills somebody, but I couldn't tell who, the lighting was terrible, we get a dream sequence where Genevieve and Wandessa kill Miss Flashback. I only mention this because it went on long enough that for a moment I actually thought the movie had thrown a curveball at me and it actually killed one of the main protagonists with more than a third of the film left to go. But no, she's alive, so Daninksy can info-dump his backstory on her. It's not a bad story, it's just delivered so blandly. This English dub actor could make the St. Crispin's Day speech boring. Yeesh. Skipping on a bit, Daninksy manages to kill Genevieve. You know, she's full vampire at this point. And while on the whole, the sequence is meh, I'll give the movie credit for remembering that show don't tell is a thing, and not using exposition to reveal that being a werewolf renders Daninksy immune to the vampire seduction powers. But alas, Pierre comes back, and oh joy, not only does he talk too much, he's a total creep who tries to kidnap Miss Flashback for the purposes of sexual assault. Well, not gonna care when Daninksy rips this guy's throat out, that's for sure. And that's exactly what happens, too. Moving on, the boyfriend from earlier re-enters the picture, a bit sooner than I'd expected. When he makes his way to Daninsky's place, which takes longer than I expected, he very quickly learns about Miss Flashback and Daninsky being an item now. And I mean quickly. It goes from him trying to kiss Miss Flashback and her turning away, to Daninksy apologizing to the boyfriend for having found out this way. It really happens that fast. It's just, jump cut. And the boyfriend certainly takes it badly. This scene is unintentionally funny, though, as the dub actor is clearly struggling to keep the dialogue as close to the mouth movements of the original actor as possible, but the original actor speaks too fast, so there are these awkward pauses mid-sentence. This only adds to the biggest problem with the conversation between the boyfriend and Daninksy, mainly that it is so boring. I honestly couldn't remember half of what was said mere minutes after the sequence was over. Something about the boyfriend threatening to start a police investigation unless Daninksy told Miss Flashback to leave with the boyfriend. Whatever he said, it worked, because the next scene is Miss Flashback and the boyfriend being kidnapped by Wandessa. He tries to shoot her, but she uses her slow-motion powers to be completely unaffected by the bullets. They don't even damage her clothes, either. Squibs are just that expensive. She's just that powerful. I actually forgot for a moment that this is audio, and I actually went to the trouble of doing a funny facial expression there. Moving on. I initially thought that this was meant as a trap for Daninksy, but no, when he shows up, Wandessa, and also Satan, who is here for some reason, played by a shadow puppet, which is somehow less an embarrassing appearance than in Primeval, seem surprised to see him. Yeah, I should mention, Satan shows up as a shadow on the wall, and he's in the movie for maybe 30 seconds, and then he just fucks off. Okay. But yeah, we're at the title bout now. The werewolf versus the vampire woman. Daninksy versus Wandessa. The final battle that I can't even pretend was actually worth the build-up. The fight's over in less than 2 minutes, and the bulk of it is made up of stunt doubles wrestling in the dirt and reaction shots of Miss Flashback. And of course Daninksy wins. I doubt that was ever a question. And then Miss Flashback takes the silver cross and stabs Daninksy. It really happens that fast. I mean, it's what he wanted her to do, sure, but that was quick. Wandessa had literally just finished melting into a pile of maggots under a skeleton. Not even a goodbye or an I love you, just... That is cold, girl. Daninsy's body turns back into a normal human. No explanation is given for why being killed by a werewolf made Wandessa's death permanent this time, and I'm not kidding, there was no sequel bait at the end here. And Miss Flashback and the boyfriend walk off into the sunset. Sunrise, I mean. And the closing credits start. Random thoughts I had while watching the movie. Pretty sure Kaleidoscope was used for the transition to the flashback scene. This didn't occur to me right away, but the guy playing Daninksy kinda looks like a guy you'd cast if you wanted Walter Koenig, but he demanded too much money. Pierre sucks. Did I mention that Pierre sucks? 'Cause fuck that guy. Every time Miss Flashback brandishes the silver cross, I just get more confused as to exactly how Genevieve cut herself on it in the first place. So, remember how I said in the video portion that this movie would end up being either so bad it's good or so bad I'd wish I was drunk while watching it? Well, shows how much I know, as really it's neither. Which brings us to the final verdict. I imagine this movie would have been more fun to watch if there had been a guy and two robots cracking jokes in the bottom of the screen, but I didn't hate it. I think the biggest problem is that while it has some good scenes, the good scenes never really gel together. They feel separate from the movie, at least to me, which is not something you want if you want your movie to be remembered fondly. In the end, if I had to sum up the werewolf versus the vampire woman in one word, that word would be, okay. I might have been willing to upgrade that to a decent, but I just really didn't like Pierre. So that was a rather meh start to the final leg of the season, wasn't it? Let's hope the next movie, The Witch's Mountain, is at least more interesting to watch, even if it sucks.